Hi, RIMBA kids. Thanks for joining us again. For today's session, we will be reading a book about a boy and an otter titled Saving Zoop by Andrea Torri Balsara. Wow, it's an otter! The otter stepped out of the river and shook itself like a dog. A few drops of water landed on Joe where he was hiding. The otter sniffed the air, searching for danger. Don't worry, I won't hurt you, whispered Joe. Joe had only seen otters in the zoo. He loved how they went zoop into the water. Now there was one in the river near his house. A dog barked. The otter wriggled down the bank and dived into the water. Joe stared after the otter. He felt sorry for it. How could it find food in that muddy river? Then he had an idea. At lunch, Joe slid a piece of fish into his pocket. Then he ran to the river bank, put the fish on a rock, and hid. Soon, the otter appeared. It wriggled up the bank, sniffed the fish, and gobbled it up. Yes, thought Joe. Every day, Joe brought some new food. The otter gobbled it all up. Joe found a trap in the garage. It was really for raccoons, but Joe was sure it could hold one otter. He hoped the otter was a young one. If it was, it would live a long time. Joe would make sure of that. Joe dragged the cage to the riverbank and scrubbed the bars with dirt to hide any raccoon smells. He started leaving food near the cage. Every time Joe checked, the food was gone. He could see webbed footprint dotted in the mud around the cage. Now it was time for his plan. Joe put a fish in the cage. Then he hid. Come on, little fella. The otter swam over. It sniffed the cage, looking at the fish. Then it stepped inside. Joe jumped out and slammed the door shut. Yes, he shouted. I got you. The otter scratched at the cage with its claws. Joe crouched down and said gently, Don't worry, little fella. I'm going to protect you. He stuck a finger through to pet the otter, but the otter jumped at Joe's finger and tried to bite him. Hey, said Joe, I'm your friend. The otter growled. It curled back its lips, showing sharp yellow teeth. Joe was worried. I'm just trying to help you. You need to trust me, he said. Joe dragged the cage home. He hid the otter in the shed. I will call him Zoop, he thought. Joe's parents never went into the shed. Zoop would be safe there. Zoop circled around and around in the cage. Joe wished he could make Zoop understand that he was safe now. He would never have to search for food or hide from dogs again. Now you will have a good life, Zoop, whispered Joe. I'll look after you. After school the next day, Joe told his friend Mike about Zoop. Mike came to see him. Wow, he said. Isn't Zoop cool? Said Joe. Zoop spun in circles inside the small cage. He made angry noises. Mike laughed. He's sneezing. I wish I had an otter. Joe didn't laugh. He felt a bit worried. Later, Joe tried to clean Zoop's cage. He poured water from a watering can over the cage and Zoop. As the dirty water streamed out, Zoop made a really strange sound, like a crying baby. It made Joe uncomfortable. Mike came to see Zoop again. Does he do any tricks? He asked. Sure he does, said Joe. You should see him swim. He's not swimming now, said Mike. He's not looking so good. After Mike left, Joe sat in front of Zoop. Zoop lay in a puddle of water in the cage. He hadn't eaten the food from last night. He was just laying there. Come on, Zoop, said Joe. You've got to eat. He waved some meat under Zoop's nose. Zoop opened his eyes and looked at Joe. Good boy, Zoop, said Joe. But he stopped. Zoop's dark eyes looked empty. Suddenly Joe knew. Zoop was dying, and he was the one who was killing him. Joe had tears in his eyes. He was just trying to help Zoop. The world was dangerous. Zoop was safer with him. But deep inside, Joe knew that wasn't true. What Joe had really wanted was to keep Zoop, so he trapped him in a cage. He had stuck him in a dark shed. He'd done something horrible to Zoop. Zoop's home was in the river. That was where he belonged. Tears streamed down Joe's face. He grabbed the cage and dragged it out of the shed towards the river. What if I'm too late? Thought Joe. When he reached the riverbank, Joe opened the cage. Zoop didn't move. Come on, Zoop, please, cried Joe. He hadn't meant to do anything bad. I'm sorry, cried Joe. Please don't die. Zoop slowly lifted his head. His black nose sniffed the air. Joe sat, hardly moving. Zoop waddled out of the cage to the river and swam away from Joe. And then Joe knew Zoop was going to be fine. He took one last look. Goodbye, little fella, he thought. Then he turned away and started for home. The end. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Do join us next week for another storybook reading where we will explore the Bornean rainforest and the animals that live inside it. See you then. Bye.